Hello and welcome to Hackcert. In this video, we'll be taking a look at what is DNS, that is the domain name system. Alright, so let's get started. So what is DNS? DNS can be called as the phone book of domains in this world. Like for example, you all know that every domain, that is every website in this world, has a certain IP address attached to it. If you go to hackcert.com, then also it has got a certain IP address attached to it. Every website, google.com, any website, be it anywhere in this entire world, has an IP address attached to it. It has to be, because computers don't understand like English and all these things. Computers only understand numbers. So this DNS actually helps in converting every domain name into their respective IP addresses. Every internet service provider has their respective DNS server. Like for example, you are using a certain internet service provider or ISP for your internet connection. That ISP also has a certain DNS server hosted in their servers that helps to maintain records of all the domains that are there in this entire world with their respective IP addresses. Now companies like Google, Cloudflare, etc., they also have their respective DNS servers, which you can use if you want. If you don't want to use the ISP DNS server of your ISP, then you are free to use the ISP of Google or Cloudflare. Cloudflare is a privacy focused DNS server which is free to use. You can use, but obviously you can use the one that also has or that is of Google. Now sometimes, almost rarely, this is rarely the case, changing the DNS server might increase your internet speed. It might. Now there is a reason why it might increase your internet speed. Now it does not happen in each and every domain that's there in this entire world, but it rarely happens in some of the domains that are there. Basically what happens is, whenever you enter your domain, we'll be looking at how this DNS works. So if you enter a certain domain in your web browser, like for example, let's say you typed in google.com and your browser actually connects to google.com. But what happens at the background is that your browser or the connection that is being made from your computer actually queries the DNS server of your ISP or the DNS server that you are using. It queries that DNS server in order to determine the IP address of that particular domain you have entered, for in this case google.com. Now if it finds that google.com IP address in the first DNS server that it queried, which is most likely the DNS server of your ISP, then it will easily connect to that certain IP address. Sometimes what happens is that there are obviously so many domains in this entire world, and every domain cannot be listed in that IP in that DNS server which your ISP owns. That time what happens is that, suppose you entered a certain domain in the URL bar of your browser and that particular domain is not listed in the DNS server of your ISP. That time what happens is that your connection is being forwarded to some other DNS server that may be residing somewhere else, that may be owned by some other company. So it goes to that other DNS server to query whether that particular domain that you have entered is listed in that particular DNS server or not. And if it finds, then your connection is forwarded to that particular website. Sometimes what happens is that, as I said, that every domain or every domain name and their respective IP addresses cannot be stored in a certain DNS server. So for that, different DNS servers might be needed to query. If in case you are searching for a certain domain which is not very popular, for example. So that time what happens is that when your connection is being forwarded from DNS servers to DNS server, your internet connection generally goes down. And it is a common experience that, let's say you are visiting a very unpopular website, a website which is not that popular. You will see that it might take some time to load. But popular websites like Google, Microsoft, Facebook, etc., they easily load. Why that happens? The reason behind it is the DNS server. Now let's have a look at how this DNS server works. Now let's say you are operating this computer You might be sitting in your home, or you might be in a certain cafe, for example, anywhere. It happens with your mobile phone as well. Let's say you are operating this computer, you opened up the browser and you are connecting to google.com. You opened up your browser, let's say Chrome or Firefox. In the URL section, you typed in google.com. Now, when you typed in google.com and you press enter, at that time what happens is that the computers or the servers or every other gadgets that are required for internet connection to take place, or for internet connectivity, they don't understand this string google.com, the English alphabets and every combination that you have typed in. They don't understand this google.com, because computers don't understand ABCD. They only understand bits, that is 1 and 0. At that time what happens is that these DNS servers that are hosted by different companies, they actually convert this domain into the respective IP address. Let's say, hypothetically speaking, the IP address of google.com is this. It is very easy to get an IP address of any certain domain. You just ping that domain through your computer using a command prompt or the terminal. You will get the IP address of that particular domain. It is that easy. All right. So let's say, hypothetically speaking, google.com has this IP address. I'm not sure whether this is correct. I've just assumed it. So when your computer is connecting to this certain server, your connection is first forwarded to the DNS server. The DNS server will query whether or not google.com is listed in their list, and if it is listed, then what is the IP address of that particular domain, in this case google.com. And once that the IP address is found, your connection is being forwarded to the server of google.com, and google.com appears in your browser. Now, if, let's say, as I said in a few minutes ago, that let's say the DNS server that you are using does not have this google.com, let's say, for example, hosted in their DNS server. Let's say google.com is not hosted in their DNS server. That time what happens is that your connection is forwarded to another DNS server that may be residing somewhere else, may be owned by some other company or something, and it is transferred. Your connection is being transferred over there. Now let's say that particular DNS server has the google.com listed in their list, then your connection is forwarded to google.com. But let's say in that server also, your domain is the particular domain you are trying to connect to is also not hosted in that particular DNS server. Then it is forwarded to another DNS server that may be owned by some other company, or maybe it is hosted in some other country, and then your domain is being queried whether or not it resides in that particular DNS server list or not. And if it appears, then your connection is being forwarded. And sometimes if you enter a wrong domain, at that time what happens is that you get an error in the computer that no such domain exists. That is because there was no DNS server in this entire world that could be queried for that particular domain. Let's say, for example, you entered instead of this O in the google.com, you entered a 0. Then obviously you won't be connected to google.com or any other domain. That time what happens is that actually you got the error because there was no DNS server hosting that particular domain with its respective IP address. That's the reason. Now let's say you are trying to connect to google.com with the particular name, that is google.com. But let's say you want to connect through this particular IP address that the domain has. Is that possible? Yes, it's possible. If you want, you can type in the IP address of the particular domain. That is, in your case, maybe it's google.com or any domain. If you know the IP address of that particular domain, then just type in the IP address of the particular domain in the URL section. Just type in the IP address and press enter. You will see that you are connected to that certain website. Alright. Now, why DNS servers are being used? Well, let me ask you a question. You might have many friends. You have many people whom you know, whom you connect, whom you contact to, and you have all their phone numbers saved in your phone, right? You don't remember each and every person's phone number. It's not possible. It's only possible to maximum 10 or it's only possible to memorize 10 or 15 people's phone number. Do you remember 100 people's phone number? No, it's not possible, alright? We don't have so much time to mug up so much things. Similarly, let's say there are millions of domains in this entire world, and it is not possible to mug up each and every domain name's IP address. Will you be able to mug up so many domains IP address? Obviously not. So it is the domain names get a certain name, like for example in this case google.com, and it has a respective IP address attached to it. And once you query that domain or you try to connect to that domain, your connection is first forwarded to the DNS server that queries whether or not this particular domain has an IP address attached to it, and your connection gets forwarded to that particular server. This is the reason why DNS servers are used, just to keep things easy for you, just to keep things easy for us. It is not possible to memorize each and every website's IP address, so that's why every domain name has a certain IP address attached to it, and those IP addresses are listed in that DNS server. DNS server does the same job as your contacts in your phone. Alright. So that's all about it about DNS. That's it for this video, and I hope to see you guys in the next one. Peace.